Good afternoon. My name is Ward Keever. I am the founder, president, and CEO of Covenant Wealth Strategies. I'm joined this afternoon by Michelle Fisher, who is our director of HR and recruiting and communications, and is also a member of our leadership team here at Covenant Wealth Strategies. Today is Tuesday, April 14th, 2026. And we are joined by the illustrious Whitney Coleman, who will be our featured speaker today for our topic on cybersecurity. Interestingly, we are a couple of minutes behind our normal prompt start because we had a power surge here at the building that forced us to turn everything off and basically restart the webinar. So hopefully that was a one and done, and we are in good shape. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Whitney. Whitney has been with LPL for over 5 years and has been involved with information technology for over 15 years. While she currently lives in Northern Virginia, she has lived all over the country and has worked for several organizations, including Deloitte and the Department of Homeland Security and the DEA. And we also learned that she worked with Volkswagen and Audi. So a very diverse background. Whitney's latest focus is on risk management and security awareness. And in addition to being a car enthusiast, she is also a plant enthusiast, having learned how to keep plants alive during COVID. I suggested silk flowers work good for that. She also has 2 puppies that keep her very, very busy. So we are excited to have Whitney Coleman with us. And Whitney, we're going to, I think, unless you tell me otherwise, we're going to go ahead and put ourselves on mute and camera off. So the focus will be on you and your presentation, but we will be right here if anything is needed. And then we'll circle back in at the conclusion of your presentation to field some Q&A. All right?
Perfect. Perfect.
Take it
Sounds
away.
like a plan. Thank you so much. All right. I'm going to share my screen here so that we can get the presentation. Okay. So I am super excited to be here with you guys today. I appreciate you all joining. We have a full presentation today. So we did get started a little bit late, but it'll probably cost us maybe 4 or 5 minutes in the end. This presentation will be about 45 minutes or so, but we will have time for questions. So if you have any questions, I will tell you right now that you can either email them in or you can ask them live at the end. So if you're watching this in the future and we're not live, please feel free. You can send your questions over and we can get those questions answered. So we should be good to go here. I believe you guys may be able to do, I don't know if you guys can do thumbs up. Are you able to do thumbs up or interact at all here? If you can, definitely send a thumbs up if you can see my screen. I want to make sure everybody can see.
Whitney, it looks good on our end. We can see your screen.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, well, let's get into it. All right. And thank you, team, for that fantastic introduction. I really appreciate it. Cybersecurity is something that I really enjoy, and it's something that's really important. Today's theme is cybersecurity awareness and protecting your identity. We're going to get into a few different areas of that and what that looks like it's been. Let's see here, I get the next slide going. There we go. Yes. So now you see what I look like here. I'm based in the Northern Virginia area. And as it stated, I've been with LPL, since 2020, summer of 2020. And it has been a really, really fun time going through and explaining cybersecurity best practices across the board to not only our financial advisors, but also to our clients and our investors and anybody really I will talk to about cybersecurity because it is so important. And we'll get into that, of course, during this. But the agenda for today is as follows. We're going to talk about how to best protect your information. We'll talk about some of the latest and greatest cyber attacks and scams that we see. And these are scams that we see across the board, regardless of whether you're a client or you're an advisor or just an everyday person, but all the kind of latest and greatest cyber attacks and scams. Then we'll talk about how you can actually secure your accounts and your devices. And we'll kind of close out with how to protect your family and your homes. So, as was mentioned, if you need the information, you probably already have it, especially if you received the invitation to come to this via email. But here's the email here for Michelle. If you have a question and you're watching this in the future, or maybe you're just not able to ask a question at the end here today live. Well, let's get into it. Let's start with the protecting your information. Now, I really like to showcase the fact that no matter where you are in your life journey, how old you are, what stage of life you're in, there is definitely a cyber threat that's waiting, right? And as ominous as that sounds, it's the truth. And we see, even with kids, right? We have child identity theft that happens. We've got people who will create new accounts for kids, and synthetic identity theft is what I've learned is where they'll take partially true information and then partially made up information, for a kid or for a child, and they will use that to, build accounts, open accounts, and do different things. So really fascinating, but these things work and they happen. So for our youth, we see these types of things on top of a lot of other stuff that we're seeing now, especially with the kids of today who are more online than the kids of before. Now we've got adult threats as well: credit card theft, or credit card fraud, wire fraud, tax refund fraud, which, as we know, that is the time of year that we are in. I did a whole presentation recently on tax fraud and the different tax fraud scams that we see, and it's really an issue. A lot of the year, it's not just around tax season. Employment fraud, that's definitely been on the rise. I think that will continue to be on the rise. Account takeovers. And then for our elders and our seniors, we have obviously elder abuse. We have family impersonation, where maybe that person is being impersonated or is being spoken to by a relative that's been impersonated. Phishing scams, senior scams, tax refund scams, etc., Social Security scams. All of these things can happen to this demographic. So, and I will get into some of the numbers here, because this is actually, this slide that I'm about to show you is the one that probably upsets me the most every single year. And every single year I have to update this slide, because it is pulled from a report that is, it's made by the data is aggregated by the FBI's IC3 team, which is the Internet Crime Complaint Center. This group, every year, they make this PDF, and you can look it up right now if you wanted to. If you just Google FBI IC3 report 2025, you'll get the latest and greatest version of it. It usually drops actually around this time of year. So you're the first group to see this. This slide was just updated, and it's always really sad. And I think last year was the worst year, because I'll show it to you now so you can see what I'm talking about. But you'll kind of see here 2018 and 2019, and then we see this uptick in 2020 and then 2021, which was during the pandemic, and the rise in which we're seeing cyber attacks that are impacting seniors or anybody over 60 specifically, right? This is this one demographic. And what's interesting is the graph kind of looked like the right side of this graph, right, with the tall bars for the 2018 and the 2019 and the 2020. And now, because of the huge increase that we have seen recently, the graph looks totally different. And I'm debating on whether I want to even show the old graph in future presentations or not, but just know that the numbers have drastically increased, and it is really sad. I think at first thinking that these numbers had boosted during the pandemic because people were at home, they were online more, they were ordering things more, they were buying from different places, and that they weren't maybe regular shoppers, and everybody was just at home and online and doing random different tasks, right? Like I got into plants, some people got into sourdough, and some people were buying things and researching stuff. So these numbers have continued to increase. And we saw a big jump between 2023 and 2024, and we're seeing an even bigger jump between 2024 and 2025. So one of my personal missions now is to really try to help educate as many people over 60 as I possibly can, so that eventually this number will go down, or it at least won't increase, right? My intention is that both of those things happen. But the different types of scams that we are seeing are romance scams. We're seeing the tech support scams. I know this is a popular one. I went to Indiana and did a presentation recently, and there was a gentleman in the audience who said, I've had a tech support scam happen to me on 4 different occasions. I think it was 3 or 4 different occasions. And they're prevalent and they're really easy to fall prey to. Obviously, the lottery, the sweepstakes ones, inheritance scams, identity theft, government impersonation scams are also really, really bad. And I've seen more and more of these, whether it be somebody calling from the IRS or somebody calling from the local police department saying that you missed jury duty, investment scams, healthcare scams, et cetera, et cetera. So the IC3 report is really interesting and they kind of break it down. And we have to remember, this is just what's been reported, right? And that's what makes this even sadder. This is just what's reported because you have to think if somebody lost $40 or a seemingly low amount to that person, or they're embarrassed, they may not report. And that's happening every single year. So what are we doing about it, right? Besides having these conversations, what are we doing? Well, I tell my advisors all the time that this is a multi-street situation. So they could be doing the best thing. Covenant could be doing the best thing ever when it comes to cybersecurity preparedness and education and having the right tools. But if their clients or investors or their partners and the people that they work with behind the scenes aren't doing their part, it puts them at risk, right? And vice versa. So we are all in charge of making sure we're doing our part to keep our data safe. So for what that means for you, right? The client, the investor, your investment accounts, protecting those, doing your best to make sure your accounts are safe. Your financial assets, same thing there. Your personal information, doing your best to minimize the amount of personal information that's out there for people to get access to, right? Your firm, right? Your financial group is making sure that they're doing their trainings, right? They have somebody like myself come in, if not me, coming in and educating them. They're taking the trainings, they're doing the things, they're following the rules that LPL has set, as well as the rules that FINRA and the larger regulatory requirements require. We've also got, the personal relationships and making sure they're doing their part within those, especially when they're working with third parties. And then two, making sure that the financial tools that they are using are secure. And LPL, of course, they've got people like myself. We've got our security operations centers. We've got AI people. We've got all kinds of folks who are dedicated to make sure data is being kept secure. And we're doing our best to educate and support and research, et cetera, et cetera. We're using the best tools, right? We're on top of it. And we've got cyber insurance, which I'll talk a little bit about here in a second. But LPL.com has a public facing website that anybody can go to. You could go to it right now, and it will talk about all kinds of things as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And this is new. This did not exist when I first came on board in 2020. And I love it. I think it's great that we offer articles. We're constantly updating it. My team has grown so much since I think when I joined in 2020, we had, at least in my particular team, right? The tech org at large is big. But my team was growing and we have continued to grow. And as we grow, we have more people to create more content and to update the content to make sure it's always relevant and informative and relatable and easy to consume. So you'll find lots of educational information there, totally free. There's also some really good, I'll give you two right now if you have a pen. One of my favorite podcasts, if you're a podcast person, AARP actually has a podcast called The Perfect Scam. And I really enjoy that podcast. I feel like they do a really great job of communicating different scams. I listened to one about government impersonation scam that was fascinating. And then Norton.com, right? A lot of us have heard of Norton. They've got a really beautiful blog. And I think they do a great job of creating visuals that explain a lot of different cybersecurity things that you want to know. Everybody's a little bit different in how they consume information, but I think it's important to keep the different containers of education available to yourself, whether it be podcasting or, maybe there's somebody on YouTube that you really like to watch and learn from, or different blogs. But one thing that you will find on our LPL website is our cyber fraud guarantee, right? And that literally is stating that LPL will reimburse you for 100% of realized losses in your impacted LPL accounts, right? Which were incurred directly as a result of unauthorized access to an LPL system. So if something happens to LPL is saying, we have you covered, right? If something happens in this regard and it affects your LPL accounts, you're covered. And we have that. So I think it's super important to pay attention to things like that because LPL is really doing their best, right? We're doing our best to make sure we're keeping our word and we're securing as much as we can all the time. Now, how LPL is using AI, because that is a hot topic right now. I will say it's actually really cool. There's a lot of different tools out here for wealth management and just for the financial industry at large. And there's a lot of things out there that people could be using. LPL, though, has been very strict and they've been treading very lightly on not just, jumping into every single tool that's out there and going after the next shiny object. They are taking their time and making sure that the tools that they are using are being leveraged appropriately. And there are a lot of rules around what advisors are able to use at this time. So how we are using AI specifically at LPL, and this is changing really every quarter. It's growing and we're getting better, but it's helping with being more efficient across the board. I think most of us realize that in a lot of respects, in a lot of ways, AI is being leveraged to make people more efficient, to make some of the more mundane tasks and job things that you have to do, right? The job to-dos easier and more efficiently done. It does save time, right? When things are being done efficiently, ultimately it ends up saving time. It's kind of like the Roomba. I think about the Roomba a lot and how we are able to strategically use this device and that's technically AI, right? We are able to strategically use this device to clean spaces when we want, how often we want. It saves time, it's efficient, and it's effective, and it's really, really cool. It's a super random pop-up thought that I had, but it's what I'm thinking of when I think about this. Personalized client experience gets better when we use AI. The scalability of things gets better with AI, right? Being able to save time, being more efficient. The approved tools that we allow also, right? That helps us to grow and to do more. The automation and analysis is also really helpful because being able to automate tasks that typically require people, again, that goes right back to being efficient. We're more efficient in some ways with that. So being able to do all of this, it's super helpful. And I think it overall will enhance definitely the ability to deliver personalized information and advice, but it helps everybody across the board. Now, your group uses Jump AI, and Jump AI was one of the first tools that LPL approved, and LPL went into a partnership with Jump, and they said, look, these are our parameters. This is what we're trying to secure and make sure, it's properly done. And we want it done right. And so they worked with Jump AI, and now we have this tool that advisors can choose to use to help with meetings and preparing for meetings, and then the after meeting things that need to happen. And this is brilliant. I cannot wait until I am able to use this in my risk assessments because it is a game changer in a lot of different ways. So being able to, have the CRM connection and to be able to, tell everybody ahead of time what's going on and to know that it really does save time. And it does make you more efficient because now okay, these are the things that we're talking about. These were the takeaways from the last call. We'll address them this time, and I'll make sure that I tie anything in. And then when we're done with the meeting, now I know who to follow up with on what needs to happen, if there's any, future to-dos, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you're wondering, why does this matter? I think the benefits really for the note takers is just, it is difficult to remember every single detail. The summaries are helpful. For me, at least, I know it's difficult to sit and take notes and talk and be present and be engaging all at the same time, even without, slides. That's another aspect of it. So having the note taker there really does make a huge difference. So I think this is brilliant. I'm really glad we have them, and that advisors are able to use them to have all this stuff kind of packaged up for you in a nice bow. And it really does end up giving you more time. I think it gives the advisors more time. It gives the clients and investors more time that's being spent doing things that is important, right? And that matters versus having to double check, like I've had to do in the past multiple times. Okay, what are we doing for follow-up? What are we doing for this? So I do think it's important, though, with all the good stuff, to remember what AI is allowed to do and what we are using it for versus what it's not, right? This is important, especially in this industry. Obviously, we're using it for data analysis, pattern recognition, being able to get summarizations, and monitoring for unusual activity. Monitoring for activity or fraudulent activity is one of the first parts of AI that was introduced to the world. I can't remember what year it was. I have a slide about the timeline of AI. It's really fascinating. The Roomba is on there, by the way, and the ability to do any kind of credit card fraud, where if your card is being flagged as like mine did when I worked for Audi headquarters. I was in Virginia and my card was flagged for being used at a gas station in like Michigan or something. And that's part of AI, right? That's what AI is known for doing, is flagging things that don't really make sense. It's not part of the traditional landscape, if you will. And then lastly, right, AI is great for note taking and doing the follow-up tasks. But what we're not going to be using it for is making those final financial or investment decisions. We are not going to do whatever it's saying without getting a human to review it or give feedback on it. We're not accessing accounts independently with this. It's not going to replace advisors or advisor conversations. And it's definitely not going to handle PII, right? That's the big no-no there. PII is a huge no-no with AI in general. We do not want to be doing that. So what this means is ultimately that AI is here to make things easier, to clear up that documentation, make things cleaner. It gives us faster issue detection, which is wonderful, which is what we want. Fewer misunderstandings, hopefully, right? Better follow-up, more time, more attention, more conversation, right? It gives you more time for the good stuff. So I'm really glad that we have these tools and there is more to come, which is really exciting. Now, what's not exciting is some of these cyber attacks and scams, but it is good to know, right? Because knowledge is power. And I know you all had a really great presentation done before, and I'm hopeful that you all saw that. If you didn't, we'll have to make sure that the video link is available still. But the presentation that you guys had seen before with the women from JP Morgan, I found was really, really great. I sat and I watched it to learn what you all had been spoken to about before, what you had been taught, so that I wasn't necessarily saying the same things, but that I was giving you information that complemented that, but also was fresh, right? Because it's 2026, it's a new year, there's new things going on. So I want to talk about some of the scams that we tend to see quite a bit. And these are scams that we see from both, from clients, from investors to, family and friends, to what we see on the news. But these are some of the hot scams that continue to be at the top of everybody's list of scams. Invoice scams, I think this is one more for folks who are potentially, if you have an Outlook account that you pay for, right? Any business owner really is going to have invoice scams coming through, or anybody that deals with invoices or other businesses are likely to get these. Romance scams are really sad. And it's interesting because we don't hear about them often, but I do hear about them every so often. So, and the romance scams, I think, are one of the hardest ones here, because with the romance scams, I think a lot of times people realize that they're being scammed. I think when the Bitcoin scams happen, the gift card scams happen, tech support scams happen, when some of these other scams happen, I think people usually realize at some point, okay, this is not good. This is a scam. I need to be on high alert. But sometimes I think with the romance scams, they're in denial a lot longer. And it's heartbreaking to see somebody think that they really have made a connection with somebody and they believe the sob story or whatever incident that the person said happened. And it's just, they break my heart. There's a few different types of scams that are really, really upsetting. Romance scams are one of them. I think extortion, there's a lot of different, even sextortion that we see. Really, really sad, especially when it happens to vulnerable communities. Now, gift card scams, I thought, were maybe taking a turn for the better. I thought this, and then I did some research, and that's how I came upon that podcast, The Perfect Scam, in my research. But gift card scams are still very, very popular. It's an easy way for money to be transferred. And so I just really want to reiterate here, and please tell this to anybody that you meet ever, that gift cards should absolutely not be purchased unless they are a gift. And I also tell people this, and unless you are okay never seeing that money again. Those are the two things, because once you buy that gift card, you cannot reverse it. In almost every situation where you buy a gift card, it is incredibly difficult to reverse that gift card charge, regardless of the distributor, regardless of whether it was Target or Walmart or a big company, it doesn't matter. So we've got to be careful. I've seen investment scams happen as well. And sometimes these are happening through DMs or messaging platforms. Any social media nowadays has a messaging platform, and I'll talk about social media soon, but we have to pay attention to investment scams. I've seen it where a person was reached out to, and they said, hey, I did this new training and I wanted to involve you if you were interested in this investment business. I got my certification, and they kind of, they made it seem like it was this real thing and they had done it and it's exciting. And they're like, well, if you send me this amount, and it was a small amount, I will, double it, and then I'll send it back to you. And the person did it. And then they send the small amount of money, the person doubles it, and they send the money back. And now the person's like, all right, well, you see, I'm legitimate. So do you want to try it with a bigger amount? And the person says, okay. And then they do it, and then they lose that bigger amount, right? So investment scams, that's just one example, but definitely do not click on things, right, that you're not aware of, and calling those pop-up numbers for the tech support scams. You have to do your own research. Big companies they won't call you. They won't call you. Same with the government in most, situations. The IRS most likely will not call you. That's not going to be their first reach out. And if you're unsure about a company, about whether you're calling a tech support hotline or not, you do your own research. Don't click on a link or email or whatever from someone that's been shared to you. Do your own search. And I've had to do this on my own when I've gotten a call from somebody. I'm like, I don't want to be rude, but if you don't mind, I'm going to end the call and I'm going to call back myself, because I had gotten a call from a lady saying she was from Bank of America corporate or something. And I have a corporate card. It's from Bank of America. And turns out it was a real call, but she was super nice about it. And that was a green flag. Usually, if they're not nice about it and they don't want you to get off the phone, that's a red flag. And so what we see when it comes to social engineering is these attacks are designed to take advantage of your emotions. And there's usually an emotional element to it of some sort, right? With phishing, sometimes these can be emails that are saying that you've won something or that you owe something, or they're just really sneaky with where they put the links or the attachments. And then you click on it, right? Invoice scams are very popular because of the attachment. And that's where the madness lives, right? If you download that attachment, it could be potentially downloading malicious malware, and then it kind of spirals from there. Vishing is over the phone, right? And vishing, smishing, phishing, and quishing sound absolutely ridiculous, but these are all very real. And this is what they're called. And with vishing, it's going to be over the phone. And this is where you may be getting a call from somebody and, they're telling you a sob story or whatever. And it could be somebody that you technically know, right? And they're pretending to be somebody, or they're pretending to call from a company or etc. But it's an over the phone type of attack. Smishing is going to be texting. I'm assuming a lot of you, I know a good amount of you you've received an easy pass or attacks I've seen out there, particularly through, smishing and through the SMS texting. But that was a very powerful attack. And they had to have made so much money across the country from this one particular scam. So smishing is going to happen via text message. And those were some pretty alarming text messages. I know some people were threatened to lose their license, to get points on their driver's license, to get their car impounded. The messaging was very intense, and it really spooked a lot of people. And then it overwhelmed the websites that were legitimate easy pass or toll websites. So it was absolutely insane. Quishing is going to be with QR codes, right? A lot of us are seeing QR codes plastered kind of all over. I'm not necessarily talking about the ones in restaurants, but more so the ones that you see in random places, maybe like on a car or on a telephone pole, somewhere. We just have to be careful with QR codes, because it could definitely lead you to a website that's not protected, and we don't want that to happen. Now, when it comes to social engineering and AI, we have to remember that with AI, these scams are just going to get better. They're just going to get better. They're going to look better. They're going to sound better. They're going to perform better. They're just going to be better. So we have to pay attention even more now because of this advent of AI. So just as not to spook, right, but just to inform, we're seeing a huge increase in AI-powered phishing. If we've got AI and it's really good at data management and being able to communicate to large numbers of people and, et cetera, of course, AI is going to be able to push phishing scams to way more people. And they're going to be way more effective because maybe these emails look more legitimate than the ones of the past that maybe had all the typos and had all of the, mistakes and whatnot. We're seeing that 1 in 4 adults have been exposed to voice scams, right? And this is not good. And I'm hopeful you'll potentially get to try out this website. I don't know if Michelle has sent it or not, but and trying to figure out different voice scams and if you can tell the difference between an AI voice or not. And then we're seeing deep fakes online. And what are deep fakes? Can you tell if it's an AI person talking or not? These are things we're literally having to learn right now. And a lot of organizations have been hit by deepfakes, right? Or social engineering attacks. So we just have to be careful. So yeah, we have to make sure when we're looking at these emails, and I'm going to walk you through how to do it, that we're paying attention and that we're looking for certain things, because most of these emails are not perfect, even if it is with AI. So here's an example, right? I call this the top-down approach. And I make my mom do this. I've had her do this with me because at one point she had received an email from Netflix and she was like, well, Whitney, I thought you were handling the Netflix account now because I don't want to deal with it between you and your siblings. And I said, oh, of course I am. I have, ownership of the account now. You don't have to worry about it. She says, well, why did I get this email? And the email is basically like, your Netflix account has been flagged, et cetera, et cetera. I said, let's look at the email from the top to the bottom. And this is exactly what we did together. And the first red flag was that it wasn't from like, account at netflix.com or account services or something like that. It was from some absolute mix match of letters and, something absolutely ridiculous that was not a real email, right? Or an email that belongs to a company. So first thing we look at is who it's from. And if you're on your cell phone, sometimes you have to actually click it so that it will show you the actual email. But we want to look at who it's coming from. We also want to look at what the message is trying to entail here, right? Usually it'll have something urgent, right? Like your Netflix account is suspended or on hold or something like that, right? You've won $1 million, those kinds of things. And some of them get very tricky. Where a very curious person, even like myself, is a little bit curious about clicking on it. You have to keep yourself from doing it, but that's what they do. They do it on purpose. Anything usually with a generic greeting, if it doesn't say hello, Whitney, or hi, Whitney, or something like that with your name in it, that's sometimes a red flag because usually if you've signed up to receive emails legitimately, you've given them your name and they have that, right? That's part of the email communication process that we use from a standard baseline here. So any sort of links or attachments. And the thing is, sometimes you can't even see the links because they're hyperlinked and they blend in. Sometimes they will put a link in the image or the logo. So we have to be really careful about the links that we're clicking on and the attachments we're opening. And then too, spelling and grammatical errors, we really want to make sure that if there are typos, anything doesn't make sense, that's a red flag, right? And then if they kind of sign off with something strange, sometimes there won't even be a signature. They'll just end the email, right? So these are some tips to top down. My main thing that I will tell people is you have to slow down. You have to slow down as you're going through your emails because most of us are moving way too fast. Now, with the, scams getting better, a lot of times the phone scams, they were, you could tell it was a scammer. You could tell it wasn't a real person or it was a real person, but they weren't doing anything legitimate. These are getting better. The fake emails are becoming more polished, right? We're seeing less typos. We're seeing better done logos. Identity theft, right? That's traditionally what we've seen. Now we're getting they're getting more of your information. They're able to personalize it, right? They're able to find out more about you and do more of spear phishing than just regular phishing. So yeah, these are some things that we see, right? Voice impersonation scams. We see the deep fake videos where someone's pretending to say things that person didn't say. And this can be really detrimental. So it could be somebody maybe trying to impersonate an advisor or a politician. I've seen Neil deGrasse, is that his name? The guy who's really into space and whatnot. They had a video of him and it looked like he was on a podcast and he was talking about something absolutely random and it didn't make any sense, but it looked like it was him. I mean, it was recognizably him, but it wasn't him and he wasn't saying those things. But if you were just, quickly scrolling, it did look like him. And so these are things we have to pay attention to. Now, we're going to talk about securing your accounts and devices. So how can you protect your info, right? How can you protect yourself? So if the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center is seeing, this uptick, what are they saying really? Well, they're saying we're seeing an increase in credential theft, which is where a lot of your information is behind. Right? It's behind that door of your credentials, your username and your password. We're seeing an increase in malware. That's big. We're seeing an increase in the amount of money that's being reported, whether it's from stolen credentials or something else. But the money is being lost, right? And it's at really, really high numbers. And we're seeing individuals who were affected by breaches, by leaks of information, by exposure, right? Their information is just out there. And it's continuing to get worse and worse. So we really do want to pay attention to our credentials. That's something we can control. We can't really control people calling us. We can't control the phishing emails necessarily, but we can control our accounts. And so I love showing this infographic. Please take this infographic. It's online. You can find it. And we can also have it sent to you, but show them this number, the number here, and have them look at ask them, how long is your password, right? Is it 4 digits or numbers or letters? Is it 5, right? Look at how long your password is, and then look at how quickly somebody could potentially get into it, right? And I think, this got cut. But what you'll see is why are we going backwards? Don't do that. What you see is when you have an account password that's all digits. So this first column is all digits, right? It's very, very, very easy to just break in with the tools that they have to brute force their way in. And then if you have numbers and letters, right, it gets easier. And then if you have uppercase and lowercase letters and numbers, it gets a little bit better. And then if you add in symbols, and then as you go, right, the more you add, the more complex your password is, the harder it is to get in. So ultimately, right, we want to be in the yellow and in the green sections here. We want it to take as long as possible for somebody to get into our accounts. So pay attention to that when you're creating your accounts and you're figuring out what your passwords are going to be, right? We've got some tips here, and you've heard some of these maybe before. Not using dictionary words, not using, your dog's name, or like my dad is a Patriots fan. I can guarantee you some of his passwords have something to do with the Patriots or maybe Tom Brady. I don't know, right? But not using personal info, not reusing the same password, right? I love my German Shepherd 44 over and over and over again, and making sure you're using multi-factor, right? These are the go-tos for passwords. Every single time you have to do this. Multi-factor, all of us know about this now. Most of us have used it or been forced to. I think that's how most of us know about it, right? Is because we were forced to do it in some respect. Maybe it was with a bank, maybe it was with your email, maybe it was with a doctor's office, right? A lot of companies are trying to push MFA because it helps everybody. If we're using multi-factor, it helps them, the company, and it helps you, the end user. So whether you're doing it through an authenticator app or you're getting a text message, or you're using your thumbprint, I really recommend having multi-factor and making sure it's set up across the board, right? For literally any account that you don't want somebody to have access to, which, if we're being honest, is most of them, even if it's something silly. My sister's Starbucks account at one point was hacked, and she didn't know for weeks. They even called Starbucks and changed her birthday. She had no idea. She says, "Whitney, I have a birthday drink." I'm like, "Your birthday's in May. Why are you getting a birthday drink in September?" "I don't know." "Okay, well, maybe we should look into that." And she calls, and it looked like somebody in Florida, keep in mind we're in Virginia, had been using her account. They had taken some of her stars. Were just hanging around Orlando, Florida in her account using, and she had absolutely no idea. And I think part of that was because, 1, her password was weak. She was probably reusing that same password. And 3, she didn't have any multi-factor protecting it. So everything really does benefit from having multi-factor. Now, one of the questions I get quite a bit now is, what are passkeys and should I be using them? And ultimately, passwords are great and they do a lot for us. It's a great way to get into accounts. And then we have our security questions, right? Like, what's your high school mascot and whatnot, right? We have these security questions that match up with them. But having a passkey is just this additional layer of authentication that's tied to the device that you're on, right? The phone or the computer. which doesn't change, and usually, often, not often at least, or biometrics. And it's brilliant. And it really helps because it's a lot harder for folks to break into passkeys. It's a lot harder for folks to lose or to share a passkey because it's something sort of behind the scenes, right? And it's also something that's proprietary. It's your device. It's your thumbprint, right? Or, your eye print, whatever you're using, and maybe the retina scanner. So basically, yes, the passkey lets you sign in without having a password, right? And you can use the PIN that you have for the device. You can use Face ID. You can use a fingerprint, something that's proprietary to you that's not replicatable. And they are safer and they are harder to crack. And I actually use passkeys with my password manager because not everybody has passkeys available. Some of the big companies are using them. I think we're eventually going to get to a point where we're not using passwords anymore. I know people are excited about that. I know I'm excited about that, but we're not there yet. So until we are there, we definitely want to protect our accounts with really good passwords. And these right here are some of our other places we really want to protect ourselves because this is where damage is happening in the messaging. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, WhatsApp, even if you're not on these apps often, please make sure you have a strong password and you have multi-factor all the time for all of these. And make sure everybody you know does too. Because even if you're not on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram or Pinterest or whatever social media, people, they can tell. They have tools now where they can tell if an account has been dormant. So you want to make sure you're protecting all of these accounts, and then you're paying attention to the different scams that are happening on them. That could be trying to get after your account credentials, right? Which is usually what they want. They want to get into your account, your social media account. And because most people are reusing the same password, they get your password for Instagram or Facebook, and then they get in, they change the password so that you're locked out now, and now they own it. And then they start messaging your friends or other people. Right. And then the cycle continues. So we really want to make sure we're protecting, we're not adding random friends that we don't really know or that maybe we know we're already connected to. So there's no reason why we're seeing a duplicate friend request. Right. That doesn't make any sense. We see that a lot. Anybody in the messaging, chat features where they're asking for things, sponsored ads for sure, right? People on LinkedIn too, I think, are seeing a big uptick, especially with those investment tips that I was talking about. That investment story I mentioned happened on LinkedIn. So just paying attention to these Instagram and WhatsApp. I get messages on WhatsApp where people will add you to a group reporting, right? Delete, report, leave the group. And just making sure that you're verifying everything that may come through, particularly if it's for a bank. Now, this last section is on protecting your family. If you have any questions, make sure you write them down so you don't forget. I will have some time to get into questions, but before we do that, let's talk about your house. So my parents have a smart home. It's really cool. They had a house built during the pandemic and it's beautiful, and they've got all the tech and everything is sort of connected to the Wi-Fi in some way, from the shades to obviously, the Ring cameras to the lady whose name starts with an A, who I won't say out loud in case it triggers anything in your home. All of these things, smart TVs, smart refrigerators, everything is smart. So how do we best protect ourselves? Number one, we want to update that software regularly. I know it can be annoying sometimes, particularly too for like the small devices like iPads and stuff. For some reason, those are really annoying to me to have to update, but it's really imperative that we do it every single time. Update your software across the board, always, because you never know what that software update is covering. Sometimes it's covering a cyber thing, something that could be exploiting that device or leaving you vulnerable. So always update. Only connect devices that you're actively using. If you have an iPad that's super old and you're not using it, you can take it off the network, right? If you have a smart fridge and you don't really use it like that, you can disconnect it from the internet. It doesn't mean obviously not use it, but just take it off the internet. You only want to have things that are active or, currently being used on your network. Plus it helps you, run faster as well. Definitely take the time. And I know this is not fun, but there are videos on this that will walk you through it. But look at the app permissions, especially to see who has access to your location, to your contacts, to your microphone, right? To your camera. Pay attention to these. And then make sure, you're using your router's built-in security features. right? Like auto updating, which would be nice, alerting you for new devices that are joining. My brother-in-law does this all the time, and he blames me when I visit for using so many devices, because I often will have my cell phone connected, my work laptop connected, maybe I'll bring my iPad or something, and I'll just come in with multiple devices and he can tell, right? But secure your home and back up your data. You definitely want to back up your information, whether you're doing it via a external hard drive, right? Which is what a lot of us have been doing for years, or you're using the cloud now. Obviously, the cloud is a little bit easier. You don't have to worry about having the external at your handy, right? That's the hard part about doing the physical data. It has to be in the room with you. And it also needs to be encrypted. And sometimes it has to be updated. And also you can lose it, right? It can be lost. It can be destroyed. I've had sometimes where the cord I've had to replace because I got a new computer and it didn't work, or I had to get an adapter for it. But there are pros and cons. Either way, you want to make sure you're securing your data. If you're using the cloud, make sure you're updating it there. Make sure that you're saving your items under multi-factor so that nobody can get in, and do your best to make sure that you're making sure things are actually updating and you're not just paying for the $2.99 or $9.99 storage fee, and that all your information is actually there. So if your phone or your computer does magically get injured somehow or stolen, you know that you have access to your data. Now, I mentioned to you before that I would come back to voice impersonation scams and what to do as a family. So what I recommend, get a code, get a phrase, make something up. I don't know what it could be. Maybe it's my mom loves Snoopy. It could be something about Snoopy or Woodstock, or I don't know, right? Pick a code. Always make sure that you have a pause before paying rule and you verify using some kind of secondary method. That could mean calling somebody else. That could mean looking that person in the face. When you see them next, that means you only send money to people through a certain app in your family. Like we agree to only send money via Zelle. We're not going to sell via Cash App. So if somebody calls me saying, can you send me all this money in Cash App? I know that's probably a scam, because why would you ask me in Cash App when you know that we've agreed to use Zelle? That's just something random I made up, but it could be helpful. It could be helpful, right? Figuring out how to verify who people are, because we are going to get to a point where it's not hard, where people are getting their voices sort of taken and being used, and then they're being used to make these phone calls asking for help, or usually it's money, right? And they want money and they want it sent. So definitely, if you're getting a phone call from someone saying that they are a relative, do not do a gift card, right? But also don't send without verifying. Right. Also reducing your public voice exposure. And that's tough, right? We're seeing online right now, a lot of social media people are struggling with their voices being used. And it's really sad. What are we going to do about it? I'm hopeful that these apps figure out how to combat this and penalize the folks who are taking the voices and the images and stuff like that and using them in ways they shouldn't, right? That's not legally authorized. And then making sure you're educating any vulnerable relatives. Right? I'm a chatty person. I'm the first one to admit this. And I know there's a lot of other chatty people out there. And some of these chatty folks may be people who don't understand cell phone or just telephone etiquette. They may not understand that the IRS or the local PD aren't going to call them. But making sure you sit down and you communicate, things that they shouldn't be doing on the phone, things that they shouldn't be saying over the phone, things not to confirm over the phone. Just sit down and have these conversations. And then two, the do's and don'ts of what not to do on AI. Definitely make sure when you're using AI that you're using it for the right things and as the right proper tool, using it to do research, using it to come up with ideas and come up with different plans and itineraries. It's super fun to do. Make sure that you remember AI is not a pro. It is not a doctor. It's not a veterinarian. It's not a financial advisor. It can make mistakes, and be cautious what you put in, right? Use it for convenience and as an assistant to help you, right? And do not put, right, the next thing here, do not put or share sensitive personal information. And then two, make sure that you're using AI on trusted devices and with trusted apps. I want to make sure I say that. Do not use AI tools that you don't understand and that you aren't familiar with. Right? Do your research. Don't assume it's always right. Don't assume the AI tool knows what it's doing. And, don't ask for professional advice and rely on that. Always verify. So we just have to be careful. Now, if anything bad does happen, I want to make sure that, and you can feel free to take a notepad or a screenshot of this slide, what to do if an account is compromised, right? Don't panic. I know your heart rate immediately goes up, but we've got to make sure we're being solid and grounded in what we're going to do moving forward. Definitely secure the account. What does that mean? Change your password. Make sure that you enable MFA if it's not already turned on, log out of any other devices, and document everything so that you have this sort of report that you can create. Contact the bank, contact the institution, whoever it is, let them know what's going on. Reach out to them directly. Don't use a number from anybody else. Do your own research. Ask them to also lock your account, monitor it for you, and then check your other accounts, especially if you know you have reused the same I Love My German Shepherd 44 password. Check and make sure. And then let people know. Let somebody around you know, let a relative know, let somebody you trust know what's going on, and make sure you report, right, to the FBI IC3 center, right? Just reach out and report that, especially too if money was lost, but even if it wasn't. I tell people all the time, protect your credit, protect your information from identity theft. You've seen a lot of these companies, they help. I know Michelle and I talked about this. They help. When something bad does happen, knowing that your credit is already locked is brilliant, right? It gives you that peace of mind, which brings me to, being able to freeze your credit doesn't take long. You can do it. I can ask Michelle how long it took her, but it doesn't take long. You can freeze it for as long as you want. You can restrict access to it if you're going to buy something. All of these things you can do. And definitely check your report, check your accounts. If you're using a password manager, check your reports there to make sure your accounts are okay. You've got to take the time to research and make sure that your data is properly protected. And if you get into the habit of doing it, it's not too bad. Now, we're coming close to the end here. I want to leave you with protecting your family. The one thing that we can definitely do is normalize verification and conversations. And that does not mean that you don't trust whoever is calling you, right? It's just being vigilant, right? Being proactive, slowing the spread of unverified information and content, right? Like if I had shared that Neil deGrasse interview that wasn't real, right? Making sure you're doing your research, reducing your public digital exposure, not putting every single thing on the internet for folks to find. And then reinforce the difference between information and advice, particularly with AI, right? If you're on the go this summer, remember these things, stay vigilant, turn multi-factor on, use a portable charger, do not plug into any USB ports when you're on the go, learn about local scams and avoid public Wi-Fi if you can. The homework I have for you today is here, and then we're going to get to questions. So your homework, I want you to remember LPL is committed, right? Covenant is committed to protecting your info. Social engineering attacks will take advantage of your emotions, so pay attention to that. Do not click on links or attachments from unknown sources. Value security over convenience when traveling, and protect your accounts and protect your family. That's it for today. And I can go back to that slide so you guys can see it, but I want to make sure I show the questions slide one more time. I want to make sure I thank you for participating today. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Michelle, what'd you guys think?
Whitney, thanks so much for your presentation. I have a lot of thoughts. The first thought is I think I'm not leaving my house ever again. Right? So just scare the bejeebers out of people. Second of all, I'm glad that we're recording this because I'm going to go back through. Usually I listen to things at like 1.5 or 2x speed so I can get through them faster. I'm going to go back through and listen to this at like half speed or 1/4 speed so that I can take more notes. You covered a tremendous.
Oh no. Very fast. So hopefully you all caught most of what I was saying. If there's any slides you need to see again, you will have access to them when the recording is live and they've made the edits and they've uploaded it. So you can definitely go back. And I do recommend taking notes. And I do recommend, if I could add even more homework to this, just spending 10 minutes, 15 minutes aside after doing this. I think really the action taking is important. Taking the time to do some of this stuff And don't just watch the presentation. Take the 10 to 15 minutes to implement, whether that means, checking to see if you have multi-factor turned on, checking to see if, a relative of yours that's chatty like myself knows what to do if they get a call from the IRS, right? Having just set some time, I think, is some other homework I would add to this. But yes, I did go through a lot. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast, but the cool thing is you can rewatch it, and you can rewatch it slowly so that I'm not talking at 1.5 times speed, and you can really absorb. And if you're like me, it may take a couple of listens. Sometimes when you listen the second time, you hear something different.
Thank you, Whitney. I'm sorry, we're having power surges here. It's happened 3 times in the last hour. So thanks just for your flexibility. Not sure what's happening with that. I want to just highlight a couple of things that Whitney shared, and we're not going to have time to get through all the questions. So we will follow up with those people that have emailed questions in and do our best to get you answers. Jesse James, when asked, "Why do you rob banks?" replied, "Well, that's where the money is." And so LPL and even our team here at Covenant Wealth Strategies, Whitney outlined early in her presentation, we've got extensive training, we've got extensive controls in place. And this is also why we cannot act on email or voicemail instructions. You can send us an email, but we must confirm that email verbally. And so we've actually had clients' email accounts get hacked, and those hackers have reached out as us posing as our clients. So this has happened. It's not just hypothetical. LPL fraud protection info. Whitney, can you just highlight that, whether on a slide or where can clients get more information about that fraud protection guarantee?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you go to go.lpl.com/cyber-fraud.html, you can type this in. It will take you to the website there where it has it. You can also search, I believe, if you can see in this image here. I don't know where you're watching on the phone or whatnot, but there's a little search bar when you go to lpl.com's website, and you can also just type in cyber fraud. And also it should pull up there, and it explains a little bit more about what's protected, what's not protected, etc.
Super. I also just wanted to touch base on the whole AI situation. So yes, LPL is using AI. Covenant Wealth Strategies is using AI. You specifically referenced Jump AI, which is a tool that we're using. Couple of thoughts is, first of all, and Whitney, please either confirm or correct what I'm about to say. One of the things, so big data AI is basically taking all of this information. One of the things that LPL, as Whitney said, she used the word strict. We are very limited in terms of what we're allowed to use. We're not allowed to just use any tools. They have to be vetted and authorized by LPL for us to use. And Whitney, they are closed systems, meaning that the information that we're using is a closed system. It's not putting our information or our clients' information out into these big ecosystems. Additionally, we are precluded, forbidden, not allowed to use any PII, personally identifiable information. So our clients' names, their birth date, social security numbers, address, anything that is specific to the client is not included in the LPL AI ecosystem. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, yeah. And that's what I was referencing to when I talked about how LPL worked specifically and strategically with the Jump AI together. It was a partnership. It wasn't just LPL kind of signing a random, form saying, hey, okay, we're going to work together. They actually went into a partnership together where it was communicated, these are the different rules in which our clients, our advisors have to adhere to, and we need a specialized sort of case. At least that's how it was communicated to me, and I'm communicating it out, like a game of telephone. But yes, there were a lot of different things that went into why we specifically chose Jump AI, why this is one of the only tools that is allowed right now for advisors to use, and that it is set up accordingly. And there's way more information I can share about that for anybody who's interested in how PII is handled and processed with this. But what we're seeing, and also we're seeing in telehealth, right? A lot of people who do virtual doctor appointments, That's PII there that's happening over those calls. And so, how is that being protected? It's very similar to what's happening in the health industry. We have to make sure, even like with therapists, what is being heard and what's being saved, what's being collected, what's being shared, what's being handled. And so, we've taken the precautions for that here.
Yeah. So our team here at Covenant actually was involved in piloting. We were very early in this jump adoption. And Michelle was our subject matter expert, still is our subject matter expert here in the office. But we were heavily involved on the front end of Jump and involved with training the system. And so that was really cool that we were able to be involved in that. One other thing that you mentioned, Whitney, is that, it does the prep and it takes the notes and it handles the follow-up. People who engage with our team here at Covenant might look at it and say, gee, I didn't realize that AJ or Miles or Pat were AI, because we actually still have team members sitting in on client meetings, client Zoom calls, client phone calls. And we think that Jump is a tool, but we also think that it's important to properly train and develop the next generation of future financial advisors. So we're using a combination of both AI and team members who engage and participate with our clients as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we do disclose and ask permission. We don't use it in every setting. However, Jump, as Ward shared, is closed AI. So Jump is very different than a ChatGPT or a Gemini. ChatGPT, Gemini, you have to be very, very careful with. PII. Jump is a closed system that is not open to the entire AI ecosystem. So that was something where LPL Legal, LPL Cybersecurity heavily vetted this tool.
Yep. I don't recall, Whitney, if you mentioned or touched on password managers. Can you just speak to that for a moment? I think that's important.
Absolutely. It's super important. Yeah, I think password managers are a game changer. It really is important to have to utilize a password manager. I recommend using a third party. So I know you all use Keeper. Is that correct still? Use Keeper
Correct.
Security. Keeper Security is fantastic. We've done partnerships with them at LPL. I know a lot of folks on my team who use it. There's a lot of different companies out there. Keeper is a solid one. I recommend using a third party because it is just easier across devices. If you have smart devices, maybe you have a tablet, but it's a Surface Pro, and then you have a MacBook, it's sometimes hard to use a Google password manager or an Apple password manager. Now, if you say, well, Whitney, look, I'm using the Apple password manager and you should be happy that I'm using a password manager. I hear you. And I appreciate you for using a password manager in general. I do. I would rather you use the Apple password manager than nothing at all, or a handy dandy notebook, right? It is safer to use Apple passwords as your password manager. But if you ever did switch devices, which I know somebody's like, why would I ever leave Apple and go to a different device? If you ever do, it is harder to transfer sometimes that data over. You'll sometimes have to extract it or export it into an Excel spreadsheet, upload it to a new tool. When you're using a third party, it's just a little bit easier. And I like to give that disclaimer. But using a password manager is going to be so much easier, so much more convenient than having to have that notebook, write things down. And the other thing too, I say, and this is going to sound a little dark, but it's true. If something happens to you, if something happens to me, right? I always think, well, what would my family have to do to try to get my affairs in order, right? My password to all of my stuff would potentially be, who knows where? It could be in a notebook, a diary, it could be under my bed. Who knows? It could be on 1,800 sticky notes that I have around, right? But if I have a password manager and you're using a third party, because I don't think Apple offers this, if you're using a password manager, you can designate somebody as your emergency contact. You can put somebody in there to say, hey, if something happens, you authorize this person. Same with your iPhone. If something happens to your iPhone, you can put somebody in as your backup person. These are things that I think about and things that a password manager offers. The last thing I will say about password managers, my other favorite part, is that it has data, dark web monitoring. So it allows you to see if your data ends up on the dark web. Being able to see that information is brilliant. If Macy's, I'm just going to pick on them, but if some company that you buy from often has an incident, sometimes they will let you know and say, hey, this account had an incident and it could have affected your information or your email. Let's update that information for you really quickly. And they'll help you do that. So I love the dark web monitoring feature. That is something that I think is invaluable when it comes to information popping up, right?
Whitney, there's a lot here. I definitely think we need to come back for session 2, right? Like this is so successful, we need to do season 2, basically. If there were your top 1, 2, or 3 takeaways, I think mine would be use two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication for everything that you log into. Don't click on links in emails, right? So be paranoid, basically, about everything. Great book, Only the Paranoid Survive. And then the third might be to use a password manager. So what would be your top 3 takeaways for people? There's so much here. What would be your top 3 to tell people these 3 things?
Yeah, my top 3, definitely it would be to take the time to implement this stuff, right? Don't just watch the video and take the notes, but really just mark aside. I tell people, even if it's just 30 minutes a quarter, right? Spending time every so often to really review your information and just pause and make sure. Because sometimes we think we have MFA turned on, or we assume that we have it turned on when we maybe started the account, but that's not always the case. So I would take the time to double check everything and make sure everything is in place. That would be my first thing. Second thing, definitely password managers, because I could do an entire presentations, and I've done this before, an entire presentation just on credential theft and password management. I could talk for 45 minutes on just that topic alone. Sometimes I have to time myself because I know when I'm doing these types of presentations that are more about, overall things, because there's so much there. And it's such a prevalent thing that's happening. So password managers for sure would be number 2. Number 3 would be to pay attention with AI and what you're doing with it, and not be afraid of it, and to use it to your advantage. Because while there's a lot of scary stuff out there, and I try not to fearmonger and make this scary, because I want people to be aware of the risks, right? But at the same time, I want you to take advantage. There's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do with AI, just like you guys are doing in the office. And there's a lot out there that can help people at any age doing a lot of different things. You can benefit quite a bit. So don't be afraid of AI, but be careful and be cognizant and do your research.
Whitney, thanks so much for your time. And for those of you that are still hanging in there with us, which is the vast majority of people are still with us, thank you for your time and allowing us to go a little bit over. I think we're going to need to do a series, Whitney. So I think we will definitely, over the course of the next 12 to 24 months, you'll all be seeing Whitney Coleman again, at least once, but potentially a series of different topics. But this has been a great overview. A lot of great information, a lot of great action items. Thank you so very much, Whitney. And for each of you who joined us today, and for those of you who will listen afterwards, I am confident that this has been a good investment of your time today. Thank you much.
Yes. Thank you all.